This conference will now be recorded.
Welcome to the May 2023 Arlington Senior Democratic Lunch. And I have very exciting news that starting next month, we are going to dabble with in-person meetings. And I've been shopping around the local restaurant scene, and I think the best for us is a private dining room at Ramparts Restaurant. Ramparts Restaurant is 500 feet from the Arlington County line in Alexandria, in sort of the Fairlington area of Alexandria. And to expedite service, they have ordered entrees. So I've put in the email a link to a Google form where you can choose your entree, and then there's a further link to a Stripe form where you can pay $30. And I hope this works out. I hope Ramparts Restaurant works out for us. The other alternatives we've been looking at are community rooms of condos and so on. The Busboys and Poets, unfortunately, he has implemented a $250 cover charge for the facility. So that would make our lunches significantly more expensive, because if we get 20 or 30 people showing up at a lunch, that's not very many people to divide $250 by for the room fee. So that is that. The other thing I want to mention, which is very exciting, is we had the first day of our school board caucus on Sunday. The next session is on Wednesday night, and then we finish on Saturday. So I know a lot of you have volunteered in the past for the school board caucus. We can still use volunteers, and you can certainly contact Steve Baker, our chair, who can put you in touch with the right people to volunteer. And if you haven't voted for school board, please be sure to vote for school board. Okay, so our first speaker is Parisa Dehghani-Tafti, who is our incumbent Commonwealth's attorney. She has a very distinguished career, first as an appellate advocate, and also now as our ongoing Commonwealth's attorney. She has been endorsed by the Falls Church, Free Press, and the Washington Post, newspapers in our surrounding area, although I believe she's actually the Commonwealth's attorney for both the city of Falls Church and Arlington County. So it's nice that at least one local paper has endorsed, let alone two. And without further ado, I'll turn the floor over to Parisa to tell you more about herself and her campaign.
Hi, everybody. I'm Parisa Dehghani-Tafti. I'm your Commonwealth's attorney. Thank you for being here. Bob, thank you for the invitation. There's only a few of us, so I'm happy to transition to questions more quickly than usual. But just to give you a little bit of background of how I ended up here today, I decided to go to law school when a friend of mine was convicted of a crime he didn't commit, and it took 5 years before he was exonerated. And when I saw how the trial happened, and secondhand, I realized that this was a problem that I might have some skills to solve. And my parents had always raised me to identify problems and then work to solve them. So I decided to go to law school at that point. In law school, I got involved with the NAACP Legal Defense Fund and started working on death penalty cases with them. I ended up working on two cases that went to the U.S. Supreme Court, where we won, and a murder trial in Louisiana. I took those cases with me to the law firm that I went to, and we became the pro bono fellow at the law firm. And then we moved down to DC, and I became a public defender at probably the best public defender's office in the entire country, the Public Defender Service of DC. And then while I was there, I got the first DNA exoneration, and sort of started a um, a real in-depth look. That led to a real in-depth look by the FBI into the testimony of their lab analysts that were doing hair microscopy. And because I'd found out in the process of investigating the case that the lab analyst had lied when he testified, that he had done the analysis, and that the analysis of the two hairs, were one taken from the victim as a known sample, and one taken from the victim that was the unknown sample. Or excuse me, that the hairs taken off of the victim were uh, identical to my client's hairs. And what we were able to prove in that case was that he hadn't even done a lab analysis at all. His bench notes were completely blank, and he testified that, in the 10,000 cases that he'd looked at, these were the two most similar hairs that he had ever seen. And we so that ended up leading to a massive FBI review, where they found that in 96% of their cases, in the hair microscopy cases, their analysts had either lied or exaggerated the quality of the testimony, the quality of the science. Well, and then, I worked on a number of parole revocation cases there, and then went to the Mid-Atlantic Innocence Project, where I was working full time on exonerating people who were convicted of crimes that they didn't commit. And while there, I started seeing this sort of burgeoning movement of people who had unusual backgrounds, not the normal background for an elected prosecutor deciding to run to be local prosecutors to reform the system. And I'd been working on the reform at that point for 19 or 20 years, and realized that there was work that could be done here. And ended up deciding to run myself, and I ran on a reform platform where I promised that I would bring diversionary programs, where I promised we would focus on treatment for people who have mental health disorder or mental illness and substance use disorder, and that we would create diversion programs like restorative justice that had never existed in Arlington before. In fact, no adult diversion programs existed in Arlington in 2019 when I ran. So I promised not to ever seek cash bail, and I promised to look at the racial disparities in our system, and I promised to act on those racial disparities, including not prosecuting simple marijuana possession because of the extraordinary disparities that were involved in that charge, and the sort of relative stance of where society viewed marijuana as compared to the collateral consequences that would follow a conviction for simple possession. I came into office, and I did all of those things. Uh, for decades before I actually came into the office was run by career prosecutors, and they'd only seen one side of the justice system. And the result of that was that defense attorneys were forced to hand copy discovery, that we had the disparities, and a lack of willingness to look at racial disparities in charging and prosecuting, asking for cash bail, seeking the death penalty, separating families by ignoring immigration consequences. And we weren't even using the one diversionary program that we had, which was drug court. When I came into office, only 4 people were in drug court, and its capacity is for 22 people. I'm happy to report that we now have 18 people in drug court. We have created a behavioral health docket that is over capacity right now. It's supposed to have 10 people, but it actually has 12. And DHS is working on funding to double it, which everybody is on board with and thrilled about. We've never asked for cash bail, not once. Uh, the judges will still impose it, but much less frequently than they used to. And to just be really clear, when we don't ask for cash bail, it doesn't mean that we just agree that everybody should get out. The cash bail issue is related to being able to get out based on your financial circumstances. So it doesn't have anything to do with the decision to ask for somebody to be held because they're a danger to the community or a flight risk. What it has to do is if you're thinking that somebody is sufficiently safe to release, those release conditions shouldn't be dependent on whether or not they can afford to put up a certain amount of collateral. And so it's just taking money out of the equation. And honestly, the people who should be held, I don't think they should get out just because they can make a high bail amount. And I've seen that with our circuit courts where, for something that is a violent crime, we ask the person to be held, and the circuit court will release them on $25,000 or $50,000 bond, and those are cases where we ask people to be held. And so the cash bail is really just to take the money piece out of it. We started a restorative justice program that is, it spent the first year educating the community on what restorative justice is, so that we could get broad community participation and real community buy-in. We now have a pilot program for 16 to 26-year-olds that where we are actively referring cases, and I'm happy to report that is at capacity right now. Because these cases are intensive and take a long time, and the capacity is low, but if we can continue the work and deepen it and build capacity, we'll be able to do more of it. We have paid very close attention to immigration consequences, and even with our conviction review unit, got a conviction reversed that would have ended up in a wrongful deportation. And so we're really proud of that. And we've preserved a number of people's DACA status where, obviously these are not serious violent crimes that they were involved in. And we have a lot more to do. I mentioned, expanding restorative justice and increasing capacity. We need to increase capacity of the behavioral health docket. And we also need to, in addition to building on, what I'd like to see is more of a focus, and what I'm going to be doing and have already started to do is focus more on gun safety. I'm working with Moms Demand Action and Brady to create a gun buyback program and try to bring violence intervention into Arlington. I would like to see a victim restitution fund, so that when victims, have like a deductible to pay or something like that for healthcare or for their car or something, that they get that payment up front through a fund, instead of having to wait until, mostly indigent defendants can pay, or not pay. And then, then you have on the other side, if people are just unable to get a job, you've got the victim who isn't getting paid the restitution, but then you've also got a whole nother court process that's criminalizing poverty for the person who can't afford to pay that restitution. And so trying to create a system where we're not failing both people at the same time is one of my goals. And we need to, right now in Arlington, somebody who's going to eventually get released potentially is still in the jail for 5-6 days before they actually even have a bond hearing sometimes, and that's even when the things are going fast. And what I'd like to see is counsel at first appearance, so that when somebody is arraigned, they have an opportunity to argue for release. Because what we see in the studies that have been done is that the longer people stay in jail pre-trial, the more likely they are to recidivate. And like the difference between 1 day and 3 days is significant in that recidivism rate. So if we can move it closer for people who are going to eventually be released, then we're ultimately making our community safer. Um, I think that there's only one candidate in this race that has the diversity of background to imagine what the system can look like in a different way. I think there's only one candidate in this race who has had the courage to um, stand up when it was not popular and when it was uh, considered quite radical to start talking about reform. And one candidate who has the character to be transparent about the work and uh, how they're running their campaign. And so I ask for your support.
Thank you. I always get the prerogative of asking the first question, and I ask it out of fairness because I think every pattern has arguments on both sides. And one of the allegations that's been made is that there's a lawyer retention problem in your office, and I was hoping to get your side of the story.
I'm really glad you asked that question, Bob, because it's a complex issue, and I'm gonna you know the filter method from your days of being trained to do deposition. So broadly speaking, this is what we've seen in every industry in the country. It's why we have the Great Resignation, quoted as a thing. We've named it. It is a thing. It's particularly acute in the sort of front facing public service jobs that where folks were continuing to work and continuing show up at work, not just work, but continuing to serve the community. Teachers, doctors, nurses, um, clinicians, law enforcement, and our office and other prosecutors. And in fact, Reuters had an article last year about the prosecutor hiring and retention crisis, and they called it that. And the National District Attorneys Association had its first ever job fair in its decades of existence in January 2023. And there were more employers there than there were job seekers who were actually admitted to the bar and could practice. So we're in a climate where this is prevalent, and for the first year in 10 years, law school graduations went up this year. And so they'd been down significantly for the last 10 years. So we have fewer people coming into the pool. We have more people uh, leaving because they're retiring, and leaving because of the sort of circumstances that we are in nationally. But then if you go down and look at the specific people who are leaving in the office, not people leaving is not always a bad thing. We've had two people leave to become judges. That's reshaping the Arlington bench in a really significant way. And it's really extraordinary that we were able to get two people from our office onto the bench. One person left because of health issues. One person left because they're getting married to somebody whose work was out of state. Three people have left to go to federal jobs that have civil service protections, pay more, and allow for telework. And then some people left because of performance issues. And it's an asymmetrical attack that's really hard for me to respond to in a substantive way because I can't talk about people's, personnel files. And as a manager, I have to respect uh, respect those things. So The story is not, the sort of the catchy phrase is misleading, because it doesn't delve down into the reasons why, and it totally ignores the context of where we are. And I'm going to be just straight with you. Like, do some people not like me? Absolutely. Did some people find that they did not like my management style? I am certain that that is the case. It's certainly the case with my opponent. Um, but that doesn't account for all of the departures. And in a way, that's really important. We've made the job harder by giving discovery in the way that we do, and by forcing people to delve into cases to look for creative solutions. Our performance measures aren't convictions. Our performance measures are, how did you treat the victim? How did you handle the case? Did you have a creative resolution? Did you spot all of the issues in a case, or did you miss something? Our performance measures are much more detailed and not oriented towards, do you put on a good show at trial, and do you get convictions? So we've made the job harder, and frankly, the circuit court bench has also made the job a lot harder. We have a bench that is not interested in change and has applied radically different standards to our office than to prior administrations, where they would let anyone dismiss a case for any reason without even having to state it. And now we have to write a brief about it. And so, they're applying just a totally different standard to us, and they're not the most temperate of benches. It's a lot of folks have said that it's not like what happens in Arlington in the courthouse, is really not normal.
If I could ask just one brief follow-up question.
Yeah.
Do you feel that both your starting salaries and your salaries for senior people are competitive with other prosecutors' offices in the area?
They're not competitive with the U.S. Attorney's Office, and they're not competitive with even our county attorney's office. So our county attorney pay scale is higher than the Commonwealth attorney pay scale. It's improved significantly, largely because that I've advocated for that persistently. The first thing that I did when I came in was to ask for job studies to be done on every class of jobs. The county did attorneys first and came back and said, they're paid more than 20% below market. And so we've been trying to move that up over time, and we have made significant progress. I would pay my people $1 million if I could, but we're still like, our pay bands are still below what the county attorney pay bands are.
Okay, thank you. We're calling Paula next. She has her hand raised.
Sorry, trying to get myself organized. I was moving from one place to another. Parisa, I've heard you many times. I don't recall hearing you mention the Victims Fund before, or maybe I just didn't focus on it. It sounds great, and I don't care if the answer to my question is from my taxes, but I'm curious where the funding would come from.
From your taxes, but I also would like to see some of that funding come from the civil asset forfeiture. I did also run in part on not seizing assets just because somebody was accused, but waiting until we have a conviction before seizing property. And the legislature actually agreed with that position and made that the law within the first year of my being in office. So we have had significant reform to make the process of civil asset forfeiture more fair. So I'm a lot more comfortable with it now. But I think that money could be directed towards a victim restitution fund. And we did have somebody take a look at our victim restitution, and for misdemeanor, for cases that are basically under $1,000 of restitution, we could wipe away all of the restitution with just $63,000. So it's not huge amounts of money that would be required.
Okay. And one other, which reflects my ignorance, you said that our judicial panel or our judges are difficult, shall we say. I do not know how are our judges appointed by by Richmond?
Yes, our judges are, the process is that our delegation makes a recommendation and then the General Assembly votes on them. And we have one new judge going into the circuit court, Dan Lopez, who is uh, leaving the general district court bench. And I was very supportive of his, I guess, elevation to the circuit court. He has a similar background to mine. He's been a defense attorney and uh, represented people on death row, and has been extremely professional and is just incredibly smart on the GDC. So I'm excited to see him on the circuit bench. And then the two deputies that went onto the bench. My chief deputy is going to be replacing Dan Lopez on the general district court bench, and my JDR, my juvenile deputy, replaced Judge Ferrutzis on the JDR bench.
Thank you.
Okay, raise your hand if you want to be called on. I have another question, which is, um, a lot of what's been discussed is what I call blue collar crime, if you pardon the expression, but typical crimes of violence or theft or that sort of thing. Uh, and I can see how diversion programs would be very valuable for a lot of those things. A lot of those are drug related in a way. But what we never talk about is white collar crime, which are things like bank fraud or all the stuff they seem to be doing in New York City these days. But anyway, what are your views about white collar crime and what your office and so on can do about that?
So I'm glad you asked that question too, because it connects with the request that I made for funding with the county board. Um, we do prosecute things like construction fraud, we prosecute embezzlement and credit card fraud and things like that. And in fact, we have one of the bigger construction fraud cases going on right now that we use the multi-jurisdictional grand jury to get indictments. And so uh, we're pretty excited about that case. But the one thing that I haven't been able to prosecute that I really want to get to the bottom of is wage theft. And my law enforcement partners have not really pursued the cases that we've brought to them or that the unions have brought. And what I asked the county board for this in this budget cycle, and I haven't gotten. So if you have anyone's ear on the county board, please reach out to them all. I asked for an investigator so that we can pursue some of those cases ourselves and set our priorities and follow some of our priorities. And the reason why is because I don't control what the police department does. So I can ask, but that doesn't mean that what I ask for is going to get done. And what I would love to see is more of the wage theft cases being investigated. I'm developing relationships with the Department of Labor so that we can work together. But it's going to need additional resources. And they're very excited about it. And we're talking about entering an MOU so that we can share information. And so while they're taking care of something civilly and on the federal end, we can take care of what happens in Arlington and the City of Falls Church on the criminal end. And we don't have particularly strong statutes to prosecute wage theft, but I don't think we're going to get to a place where we can change those statutes until we have you know, until we've until we can articulate and demonstrate the challenges, or like things that we couldn't prosecute because there wasn't a statute that fit. So uh, we really need, for sort of systemic change on wage theft, we really need an investigator in my office to do that. And so please advocate for that.
Okay, Joe Pelton has his hand up.
Oh, hi. It's just the Washington Post editorial recently. Uh, do you think that they essentially presented what has happened and what should happen next fairly, or would you want to comment further on that editorial?
Um, Hi, Joe. All I'll say is that I was very grateful for their endorsement. And I can't speak to anybody else's process, but from my perspective, I think they made the right choice in the Arlington race.
Carol Fontaine.
Hi, just taking myself off mute. Um, this is my first senior dem lunch. Um, so,
The food will get
Parisa,
better. The food will get better.
well, I'm getting hungry. Um, so, um, Speaking of that Washington Post article and the endorsement of you, it 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 said that Josh looks like he's somebody or seems to be somebody who wants to follow on the reforms that you have started. And my thinking about that is that, and you've alluded to some of this, where you have made relationships and you've been working with people, and some of the stuff that you talked about when you said there's still stuff to be done and you're working on that, and I don't see Josh having any of that. And I mean, he's kind of gonna, well, I mean, this is what the Post says. I don't know that he really has any connections, but anyway, if you would just talk a little bit more about how hard you're working and to on these new things and the relationships that you've made.
Um, I mean, I don't think that there's any substitute for the fact that I have been involved with fair and just prosecution and have relationships with experts in juvenile justice reform areas and uh, in harm reduction, in wage theft, in uh, policies on peremptory strikes and jury selection. Um, and I don't think that there's any replacing the fact, and I don't say this with any hubris, um, uh, the fact that we've gotten national attention in Arlington and become a leader on the reform front, and doing it in a deliberative, careful but effective way. And so, and all I would say about my opponent is that uh, I've built for 23 years, brick by brick, the experience and the foundation and the relationships that are necessary to reimagine the criminal justice system, and to make it more fair. And I just don't, I don't, I think it's lacking on the other side. And my experience has been that my opponent is not a reformer, and he hasn't made any promise, like actual promises, and stated any positions other than to say that everything that I've done. So
Okay.
You
Do you
you
want to
said
just
that
take a?
the
Do you
other
want to
day
just
or something. Can I
go
just
ahead?
ask one more thing?
Sure.
Yeah, you were talking about something else that you want to get started, and there's a lot to do to get it started, and it's going to take doing, and I forget exactly what it was, but it's another chapter. I mean, you keep creating new things.
the gun buyback, yeah,
Yeah, maybe that's what it was. Yeah.
yeah. So the two sort of big things that are going on right now are the gun buyback program that we're trying to create. And we're trying to create it in a way that can be studied so that we can test its effectiveness. And we have partners that are very excited to do that with us. And the wage theft issue, those are the two big things.
Parisa, do you just want to take 1 minute to summarize and tell us your website and so on?
Absolutely. So I'm at parisaforjustice.com. That's PARISAFOR justice.com. And gosh, I always struggle with how to leave things. But the quote that I have on my personal email account is that we need in every bay and community a group of angelic troublemakers. And that's how I've always tried to live my life. And when I apply my skills to change a system, that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I think that we really need somebody, uh, like we need to keep the progress that we've made. Like we need to continue on this path. And I think I'm the only person who can actually keep us on that path.
Okay, thank you for joining us. We really appreciate you giving us your time. Our next guest is Senator Barbara Favola, who's been a real stalwart for progress in the Senate. Most people our age remember her as a member of the Arlington County Board, where she had many achievements there as well. Without further ado, I'll give you Senator Barbara Favola.
Oh, thank you, Bob. I really appreciate being with the seniors at this Democratic luncheon. So it's a great opportunity to chat, and I want to make this as conversational as possible. I will give you just a brief overview, but I'm happy to talk about any topic that's important to you or to take questions. The General Assembly, we were in a situation where not a whole lot got passed, but the progress, I can say, was really the blue brick wall in the Senate. And I say progress in the sense that we were able to maintain progress. So we weren't moving forward, but we didn't move backwards either, especially on issues that are very important, I think, to this group. Gun safety, for example. We had passed when the Democrats were in control of the House of Delegates and the Senate, and Governor Northam was our governor. We really did make progress in the gun safety space. We expanded the background check law. We went back to limiting one handgun a month purchase. We were able to make some progress in the domestic violence space. I carried a bill that passed in 2021. The governor signed it, which essentially it took firearms away from those who were convicted of assault or battery of a family or household member. So we made considerable progress when the Democrats were in control, and there were bills that were intended to unravel those, and we were able to hold firm. And in the abortion area, of course, Governor Youngkin came forward with a 15-week ban. There were several lawmakers who put in bills that mirrored Governor Youngkin's proposal. And of course, in his budget, he actually had language that would criminalize providers. There was language to put providers in jail if, in fact, an abortion ban were to pass and they violated it. So we're talking about some pretty extreme philosophical views, in my view, that sort of permeated the General Assembly session this last year. And of course, all those anti-abortion bills were defeated in the Senate-dominated Education and Health Committee. And then, of course, the environment. The governor attempted to roll back all the progress we made on the environment. We had 7 bills that would have taken us out of the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We were able to defeat all of those. We were able to defeat several bills that would have removed, the progress we made on electric cars. By 2035, we want all the cars on the road to be electric, and there's a phase-in period, et cetera, et cetera. So we were able to maintain that. We were able to maintain progress we made in cleaning up the Chest Bay. So I have to consider the fact that we were able to hold the line as a very positive thing. And I hope you all view that as well. So elections matter. Personally, 20 of my bills passed each chamber and were signed. I focused a lot on healthcare issues, and I do have a lot of expertise in that area, so it was a little easier for me to maneuver through all the hoops. Some of my bills, I'm setting up a generous grant program to local and regional jails, which the governor is bragging about right now as we speak at Stafford High School in Fredericksburg. So my program will allow regional local jails to pull down dollars for a comprehensive drug treatment program. So offenders are not only screened, they would go through medically assisted detox, they would have ongoing treatment, and they have to have a robust transition plan back into the community. Because we actually do have a fair number of overdoses when folks are released from jail, which people may not know. I had several bills that substantially increase counseling services in our schools, which was great. We can hire more counselors with the money that was made available in the biennium budget. I'm expecting more money to be available if we get our amendments through in July. I also passed a law which will allow school systems to hire psychologists on an interim basis as long as they're working towards their final licensure. One bill that got a lot of attention was a bill that will require emergency rooms in our hospitals to have more trauma-informed security. So staff and patients and visitors feel welcome, safe, and treated quickly in our emergency rooms. And one of the requirements was actually a 24/7 security guard who, again, was well trained and trauma informed. So I have a lot of healthcare bills in that space. And one bill that got a lot of news coverage, and it just gives it an example of sort of how how extreme our governor is. I had the simplest bill in the entire General Assembly. It was 3 lines, very easy to read. And it merely said that menstrual health data stored on an app or an electronic device could not be accessed through a search warrant. So, and this idea came to me from one of my younger constituents who participated in a town hall meeting. And she was very concerned that if in fact there were to ever be a ban in Virginia on access to abortion care, would law enforcement go looking for my app? So I told her I would look into it. And sure enough, the HIPAA law does not protect the health data stored on an app. It's a third-party record, and it's not a quote medical record. So after I was confident that I researched this enough and got advice from no fewer than 5 lawyers that I actually needed a separate law to protect menstrual health data, I went ahead and put it in. It was a privacy issue as far as I was concerned. Who would want access to your menstrual health data, right? So it passed the Senate with bipartisan support, landed in the House, died in a subcommittee after Governor Youngkin's spokesperson came up and said that they needed to defeat the bill. And, I countered by saying this bill should pass. And why? I told them again, I went back to there should not be government interference in menstrual health data. Law enforcement should not have access. The only reason you would need it would be to criminalize behavior. That's not who we are. Please pass this bill. My argument failed. but a lot of news networks picked it up, and Governor Youngkin for 10 days was defending why he thought he needed menstrual health data. So it was sort of an interesting, it's an interesting conversation. President Biden issued a press statement on my bill stating that it reflected the dignity and privacy that we should extend to every American. And Colbert picked up the bill too and gave all these reasons why Governor Youngkin actually needed access to the data. So it was sort of funny. Um, that's, in my mind, sort of sums up the General Assembly session. We, even on some basic common sense things, we didn't get things past the House. And you know that this is an election year, so lawmakers tend to focus on brochure type bills, or they're extraordinarily sensitive to primaries on either side, either the far left or the far right. So they, rather than trying to make good public policy, they're really preoccupied in figuring out if a bill would somehow draw a primary opponent, which was unfortunate, but that's the reality. I'm happy to take questions, or talk
Sure.
about a topic if you would like me to do
Well,
that.
I get the prerogative of being the first questioner,
Oh,
and the two areas that I follow very closely are public utility regulation, which is extremely boring, and the issue of free speech on campus, which I find very, very intriguing, in part because Governor Youngkin really professes to be the standard bearer and the principal defender of free speech on college campuses. And I think both of those issues are very important because every Virginia citizen pays utility bills and relies upon the State Corporation Commission to defend them from monopoly power.
right. That's right.
And obviously, campus climate is very delicate. It's only regulated and influenced indirectly by college administrators and so on. And I was wondering, whether there are any things you have to offer in either pot of issues.
Well, on the public utility, we did have a Dominion bill this last session, and I was very heartened because we were able to expand the number of stakeholders who were at the table negotiating this bill. And it was great. I got a lot more environmental activists at the table, and we had some consumer activists at the table. So I don't know if you remember, but under the Clean Economy Act, which actually Delegate Rip Sullivan had carried in the House, Senator Jen McClellan carried in the Senate 2 years ago, and I was a co-patron. Under those pieces of legislation, Dominion was required to have a certain percentage of its portfolio over time moved to a renewable energy source. And they still had to maintain reliability, but that was the goal. This bill that came forward this year is Dominion wanted a fair amount of rate protection while they went forward with an offshore wind project. We thought the rate protection, I thought the rate protection they were asking for was excessive. Other people agreed with me. So we were able to change the normative assessment of what would be appropriate return. We had they were comparing themselves to a cluster of states, and we changed that cluster so it was some southern states and some mid-Atlantic states. We were able to give the State Corporation Commission more authority over evaluating not just the rate of return, what the customer rate should be, and what the public benefit should be. So we ended up with a bill that I think is going to be pretty good. And over time, we'll probably reduce our payments by about, on average, by about $7 a month, will give us offshore wind, which is a renewable energy source, and strengthens the State Corporation Commission oversight. It took a lot of work. And I will give some credit to Governor Youngkin. He personally got involved in those negotiations and was very amenable to giving the SCC more oversight, and I think actually was value added in this conversation. He's not a value added in a lot of conversations that I care very deeply about, but he was value added in this one. And I was pleased. I was really pleased. So that's my view on the public utility. Bob, you probably read the bill. It was very long, and I hope I gave a brief overview, which is a summary that
Yes,
sort of
yes, you did. And I'm probably the only person in Arlington, Virginia, who read the whole bill. So,
except
so
me. Yeah,
I'm,
yeah,
I'm,
you're right. I mean,
do
it was like a 99 page bill, so I tried to give you an overview of what happened.
you
Um,
have any insights in freedom of speech on state-owned campuses?
well, I turn to the U.S. Constitution. I think that's and court rulings on freedom of speech. Unless speech is really going to incite violence, um, there's a wide how shall I put it? The interpretations of our First Amendment are very broad. The ACLU has been an active litigant in cases regarding free speech. And they come down on the side again, unless something's going to really incite violence, an individual or a group, they have the right to express themselves, either verbally, they go to an open mic, or they can carry signs, or they can demonstrate. And I think we have to allow that to happen. I mean, there are tools that organizations can use, local governments, for example. If you're going to demonstrate, you need to get a permit and you need to follow certain rules for public safety, but nothing that will impede your ability to put whatever you want on that sign, unless, of course, it's going to incite violence. And, I mean, as well as I do, Bob, we've had court rulings that allow expressions of hate, which I find very troubling. But we have had court rulings that were very, very broad in terms of what would be permitted under the freedom of speech and amendment.
Thank you for your answers. Joe has his hand raised. Joe Pelton.
Hi, Joe. I remember you from my county board days and all the service you've given to the county. So
Unmute yourself, Joe.
It's just about the redistricting, and what impact do you think that's going to make? First of all, how has the redistricting process that we approved worked or not worked, and to what extent does it jeopardize Democratic people, particularly those who have to run against each other?
well, Joe, you asked a great question, and I think voters will be happy with the results. I mean, there was a difference of opinion on how we should go about the redistricting, although there was sort of I think, a large swath of folks who felt that the drawing of district lines, both for the House of Delegates, for the state Senate, and for our congressional delegation, should be done by people who don't have a vested interest. I think there was a, you know, uh, almost a consensus on that point. So the voters voted in on a referendum question that an independent commission be established to draw the lines. And if this independent commission could not come to agreement, then it would go to the Virginia Supreme Court. And the Virginia Supreme Court would be charged with drawing the lines, but they needed to consult with a special master offered by the Democratic Party and a special master offered by the Republican Party. So, as far as I can tell, and we did hire a law firm to actually monitor the process, the Democratic caucus did in the Senate. as far as I can tell, the Supreme Court listened to their two special masters, and a compromise plan was developed. Now, protecting the incumbent was not a factor in the decisions. They first followed the federal law on the Voting Rights Act, and they followed our state. We also have some state laws that articulate even more and with more specificity voter rights. And then we talked about compactness in our state laws, and we talked about ensuring that minority voters are not disadvantaged, et cetera, et cetera. So the Supreme Court considered the legal framework I just explained and drew the maps. Now, obviously, we have had incumbents in the same drawn in the same districts, and some have decided to retire. And then there were some retirements that were going to come anyways. But if you're asking about the nonpartisan lean of the maps, the Princeton project on, they would say, gerrymandering reform ranks us first or second in the country as having the most nonpartisan maps you could get. As it turns out, because of the population growth in Virginia, and we're just becoming more diverse, and we're a highly educated state, the maps sort of favor Democrats, both on the Senate side and the House side. So that's just an interesting aside. It's just the way it turned out. It wasn't certainly by design of the Virginia Supreme Court. So, if you're looking at it from a Democratic perspective, in electoral perspective, I don't think you should be displeased.
For
So
both the Senate and the House.
for both the Senate and the House, we have more secure Democratic House seats than the Republicans have in the House of Delegates. We have 48 solid Democratic seats. They have 46. Now, there are about 8 seats in play, and we really need to win 4 of them to control the House of Delegates. I always say 5 because that gives us a little bit of a buffer. And we have 8 in play. So we've got a really good shot. And then, of course, we just had a special election in the Senate this past January 10th, and it was in one of our swing districts. It was in Virginia Beach. That Senate district had been held by a Republican, Jen Kiggins, and she went on to Congress. She defeated Elaine Luria. But it was her Senate district, and we won it. And we won it on the abortion issue. So let me just get rid of this call. I think we've got a good shot. I mean, you never know. Elections take strange twists and turns, and I think the national backdrop always plays into the state elections. Governor Youngkin's going to have a lot of money, but I think we're going to be okay. I mean, I think the Senate, if I had to bet, and I don't like to bet on elections, but if I had to, I would say the Senate stays in Democratic hands. We need to grow our majority. Right now we've got 22 senators, but only 21 who are consistently voting with a pro-choice agenda. So that's an issue. And it's, when you have 21 to 18, it's sort of, some senators can get motivated by making a deal and leaving the fold, for something that is incredibly important to their district, regardless of whether it fits a Democratic value structure. So I'd like a little bit more of a cushion, and we're going to work on it. I know Rose is going to help me, and lots of other people here, and the Democrats in Arlington are amazing. I mean, part of the reason we won the Aaron Rouse seat is we had so many people willing to go to Virginia Beach, knock on doors, and Beyond Arlington, and was an organization that was part of that, soldier on the ground, boots on the ground effort, and it paid off. So, I mean, I think one of the top things we have to really work on, besides the gun safety stuff, which we have to, I mean, we have to do something more than what we're doing, and that's another whole conversation. But I would really like to get a constitutional amendment before the voters on abortion access. I mean, it's a healthcare issue, it's a dignity issue, and let the voters decide. It's something that government really should not be a part of. It's a personal decision. So we're going to
If
work
we
on
can
that.
win Kansas, we can win Virginia, surely.
Oh yeah, absolutely, Joe. No, you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head. And you have to remember the governor doesn't need to play a role in the process for getting a constitutional amendment before the voters. We have to get the language past each chamber without a comma moving for 2 sessions, 2 consecutive sessions, and then we have to have a General Assembly election in between. So if we have the right players in the General Assembly, in the Senate and the House, we can make that happen. And it doesn't go to the governor. If we can meet that criteria and have a General Assembly election in between, and then we can get the referendum question before our voters. And I really, really want to do that. I think that is the only way, especially in today's backdrop where, we can really secure protection to abortion care. And I think the voters should be given the opportunity to decide that. So that is going to be my really top priority there. And I don't know where else we can go. Gun safety is going to we're going to have to work on that. We had an assault weapons ban come before the Judiciary Committee in 2021, and that did not get out of a democratically controlled Judiciary Committee. So we're going to have to work a little bit more on that. So I do want to do a ban on assault weapons or high capacity rifles, AR-15s. And I would like to raise the age of purchasing a gun to 21. I mean, I just think, younger people are so emotional, and their brains are not fully developed. They're acting on impulse, and they don't fully understand the complete consequences. And we have science and evidence that shows this. So why are we allowing them something so dangerous as a firearm? We'll see. I mean, I don't know if we're going to succeed in that. But if the House if the House of Delegates does not flip to Democratic control, then we won't get any of that done. So,
Barbara, do you want to summarize and tell us your website and so on?
oh, sure. Oh, wow. It's just 1:00. Sure. My website's barbarafavola.org. And I've got a whole issue section, so you can really go through and read a lot about each issue, and legislation that is passed and legislation that I've sponsored. And I guess my Facebook is Barbara Favola. .com, and go to the government. When you go to my Facebook, you have an option of going to one of 2 pages. One says government and one's private. I want everybody to go to the government page because that's where I'm posting information that would be of interest to you. I don't really use my personal page at all. And I am on Twitter. So although I usually just post what I'm doing on Twitter, I try not to get into conversations on Twitter. And they don't seem to be helpful or deep or so I'm not a social media queen, which, some people are, but that's just not my thing.
Sure. Well, we want to thank you so much for taking the time to visit with us, and of course, you're on the ballot on June 20th.
I am, yes. So there's early voting, and I have a lot of information on my website. So if you have any questions, I've got the whole plan on where you vote, what location, the hours, all of that. And last thing I just want to say, Arlington, we looked at all 40 Senate districts, and Arlington was second in the number of people who've already voted. The
Really?
first, yeah, the first district, the first Senate district that was number one is my current district with Arlington, McLean, Great Falls, and parts of Loudoun. They probably have a little bit more going on. So, and they are big voters there.
I've been encouraging people when I canvass to vote early.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's great, and it's great, and you can now ask to be on a permanent list for an absentee ballot to be sent to you, which people like. Um, and a lot of folks feel safer voting early. So great, and that was I guess thank you for bringing that up, Bob, because that is one thing that we also held the line on: access to voting. We made significant progress. Again, when the Democrats controlled the House of Delegates and the Senate, we had Governor Northam. We had made significant progress and we held the line. So I guess I've talked enough. In case you guys want to talk about me, I'll get off. But
Okay.
I've enjoyed my time with you. Thank you
Well,
all.
we enjoyed having you. Thank you so much. And we do have one more guest today, who is JD Spain.
Can I
And
hang on?
I first met JD when he was running for the House of Delegates, and since then he's served as president of the NAACP here in Arlington, and now he's one of our candidates for county board. I must say, I attended the county board debate that was at the last ACDC meeting last Wednesday, and I was so impressed with the decency and rapport that all of the candidates have developed between them. And I think that's really what makes Arlington so worthwhile as a political body, that there's a certain amount of collegiality even among competitors. And I personally deeply appreciate that. And I could probably spend more time lauding JD, but he's certainly a man who can talk for himself. So I'll turn the floor over to JD. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Bob, and to all of the Arlington County Senior Dems. I think you can hear me, right? It is a pleasure to be back amongst friends. Of course, I feel comfortable because this is not my first time in this space. As I look at the attendees, I think I chose the wrong hour, the 1 o'clock hour, because everybody went back to work. But be that as it may, we have a terrific audience, and anytime I'm in the presence of the great Senator Barbara Favola, I feel everything is going to be all right. Look, I am, of course, Julius D. JD Spain Sr. Tick up JD because I have a 28-year-old son. We call him LJ. But look, I have been in Arlington for a little bit over 14 years. And like Bob has mentioned earlier, this is not my first rodeo show running for public office. I am running now in the Arlington County Board, along with 5 other candidates for 2 of the open seats on our county board. We should all commend both Katie Crystal and Christian Dorsey for their sacrifice in public service over the past 7.5 years, and we thank them well in advance to their departure. I am running because at this moment in time, I think we're at a consequential election, but also experience matters. Leadership matters. People that have an innate understanding of what's going on in county government, whether that's environmental and climate justice, whether that's housing, whether that's public safety, the full gamut, our taxes, the corporate vacancy rate. You need to understand that. You need experience on the dais. And you also need individuals who have those relationships. I have served in the Marine Corps for 26 years. I served as a federal employee, a GS-14, former federal investigator. I served on Capitol Hill as a congressional fellow. I served on a diplomatic assignment in Brussels, Belgium. I served in the Pentagon for 4 years. I worked at the highest levels of the executive and legislative branches of government. I worked in social justice and civil rights at the grassroots level. And trust me, I am a die-hard, lifelong, committed Democrat. Okay? So with that being said, I do have some priorities, right? Every candidate has priorities, but at the end of the day, regardless of what priorities I may have, it does require a consensus consensus from the community and consensus also from members of the dais. I believe right now my first priority, which I am taking on, and I think our senator talked a little bit about this, but is dealing with our mental health challenges, not only here in the county and some of our programming, but how that is also connected to everything we do in our employee base, our citizenry, our community-based programs, and working alongside our schools to help our youth. 1 in 5 adults suffer from mental illness, 1 in 4 adolescents. Those numbers are sharp. They are alarming. And we see people on our streets. We're seeing people show up at detention facilities, yet we have not put forward the right services to help them out. And I want to help shape what that may look like here in Arlington, short and long term. We also want to talk about affordable housing. We had an extended conversation as related to the missing middle, now called expanded housing options, that went on for a number of years. And thanks to our good friend Eric Gutshill for getting that train to depart the station many years ago. And I'm glad to see the fruits of his labor and many others as the county board just made a decision to remove, basically, in my opinion, exclusionary zoning. Missing middle does not solve affordable housing in our community. But what it does do is start the methods and process by which we can diversify our housing stock portfolio. I live in a single family home in South Arlington. There's developers, there's rental properties. We don't have a lot in the middle across Arlington, and it all can't just be concentrated on the south side or parts of the north side. So I look forward to that engagement. We have some metrics in place to kind of analyze and check that on the backside, but I think the county has started in the right direction. However, there's more work to be done. I want to look at different things like community land trusts. How do we incentivize that? How can we bring something to that type of model with our home ownership study to Arlington? There's 253 cities across America that are doing it. I think Arlington has the opportunity to at least look at it, analyze, and see if we can do that here in Arlington to build out more affordable housing. When we talk about our environment and sustainability, I'm proud to be endorsed by the Sierra Club. I've been a long time champion of environmental sustainability, whether you're talking about our roads, whether you're talking about solar, whether you're talking about build out of new development and how we incentivize that. I really want to, and we have a policy, some goals in Arlington. We got a climate policy officer that came on about a month and a half ago. There's still a lot of work to be done in that area. And I look forward to being part of that and protecting our environment and make it more sustainable here in Arlington. And lastly, when we talk about supporting this economy and our economic security, we've been talking about corporate vacancy rate, my friends, pre-COVID. Okay, so this is not new. We're right around 22% corporate vacancy rate. We're going to have to solve that equation. And what I'm thinking about, you may have heard of this back in 2015, 2018, Arlington Economic Development Committee. We're talking about innovative economy. Well, I think we are at this point now where we have to get outside of traditional modeling, and we need to think about how we bring in new business, whether that's from biotech, whether that's lab science, something like they're doing out, we have in Montgomery County and stuff like that. There's some competitors, but traditional modeling is going to have to change. And we're going to have to incentivize and bring in new business because you know what fills buildings? People. And in biotech and in lab science, those people can't work from home. They need to be in the building. Every building can't just be torn down and turned into an affordable housing unit. That's costly. And there's things we're going to have to do to get that corporate vacancy rate under control. We've been promised control of that many years ago. It has not happened. All right. So I look forward to this Q&A, this discussion. As Bob talked about, I can go for 30 minutes, but I need to kind of cut it off and maybe answer your questions. I am proud to be endorsed by a number of unions. When we talk about workers and families, my friends, I'm there. Many of you know my work in the NAACP and the relationship between unions that goes back decades. So Nova Labor, IBEW, LIUNA, even the Northern Virginia Realtors Association endorsed me. YIMBYs of Northern Virginia support me. ASME, which is about our municipal and county employees, have supported me. Look, I have done the work. And if you look at all the candidates across the board, I think I'm one of the most highly qualified and well suited and prepared to be working on day one. Not on the job training, I will be ready on day one. So with that being said, I'll turn it back over to Bob and to the great company here among us and be open to any questions you may have, and then back off to the campaign trail I go.
Well, thank you so much for that engaging summary. Uh, I think that one of the questions that a lot of people, particularly in this group, have is, what do you feel Arlington County should do about elder care? We have a number of dedicated facilities in the county, and there's also some age at home, age in place programs. What do you think about elder care vis-a-vis the initiatives of Arlington County?
So thank you for that question, Bob. And when it comes to our elders, my mother and father are up in age, 73 and 71 respectively. And I have a fond appreciation for, individual citizens who have worked hard and age in place. The county has put forward some programming. Our committee on aging has made some recommendations therein pertaining, but I believe perhaps there's much more we can do. We've seen some of our seniors who are now a bit nervous about taxes and tax burdens that may be coming on them based upon age and set incomes. But I will look at many ways and work alongside stakeholders to see what more we can do. At this moment, I'm not particularly don't have a particular issue. I do know that I support our citizens, um, and I want them to be able to live in place. I want them to reside in place. I want them to, if they want to, change out their housing and do a different type of housing and move their footprint to a different type. I want them to be able to do that. But I know they have a genuine concern. Next week, I'm going out to speak to a group of I don't call them my elders or senior citizens. I call them our wise council. So I think there's more to be done. I'm willing to work hard to support them, just like I'm willing to support all Arlingtonians. So if there's a specific area that needs to be addressed that I may not have brought up here, just let me know. You're muted, Rob.
Are there other questions? Does anyone just raise your hand or wave, and I'll call on you? Another question that we have is that there's always tensions between the county board and the school board regarding the funding of the school budget. Where do you stand on that, JD?
Sure. I think in this budget that was just approved, Bob and everyone, about 40% of our budget goes over to school board, to schools, to APS. Now, I am a big supporter of APS, but I also understand that there are some fine lines, right, as it relates to governance when the school system and school board members and the superintendent, as they develop their budget and their priorities. I believe it's critically important, right, that the county board and school board work in tandem, especially with programming that's going to be positive for our students. I've heard those echoes, those talks about some tension. I have a really good relationship, professional relationship, at least I should say, with members of the county school board, and also with a lot of the staff. I will look at ways to work together in unity, to be more transparent, to be more accountable, to listen to our community, to listen to our families. But when it comes to budget, I'm also want to look at ways where county programming and school programming can work in tandem. Back to my priority when we talk about mental health, how we can coalesce and work together to get in front of some of these things that I've been talking about when we talk about mental health. I believe there's some opportunity there from what I'm hearing, speaking with some of the members of the school board, that for mental health, for example, the school system cannot be the go-to to fix, to help our children. We're going to have to work in tandem with county officials, county staff, DHS to help out. So I will look at ways, Bob, and everyone on this call, to work together in unity. We are sending the money over. We should continue to send the money over. We don't check the number. I shouldn't say we don't look over their shoulders as much, but they have a duty, and I think we'll be fine. There's always a lot of noise out there in the community about this relationship between school board, county board, and I was told many years ago when I got here that JD, you have to understand there's special dynamics to that, and they are, at least for the school board, as you know, are elected officials, and you have a superintendent, and they're working on behalf of a number of folks. So we'll work together to make not only our school system but our community better. I think there's a hand raised from
All right, yes, from Joe Pelton. Please, Joe, go ahead. I'm sorry,
Joe.
I'm still on the mute.
You're fine, Joe. How you doing, Joe?
Hi. Can you walk us through the voting process for county board this time? Because the ranked voting and how that really works with two positions, I guess, are open, right?
Yes, sir. And thank you for the question, Joe. So as you know, Arlington, we took it upon ourselves and to we're going to go ranked choice voting, and the top two of the six are ultimately going to get elected. So what happens is the citizen goes into the voting booth and they're going to rank 1, 2, and 3 in that order. They're going to choose not 1, not 2, but they're going to get an option to choose their top 3, right? And then what's going to happen after, I think on that Friday when the last absentee ballot is counted, because we won't know the night of, right? Basically, the top 2 will be selected. Now there is a possibility, right, that on day one, anyone that receives, I think it's 33% or something like that plus 1, right, Bob, that they will be identified, margin of error a little bit. But basically, you need to know, Joe, that when you go into the booth, you're going to rank the top 3 candidates in your order, in your preference, right? Of the 6 candidates, 1, 2, and 3. There's
So
our systems right now. Excuse me, sir.
just to be clear on that, though, uh, in other words, you can vote for 2, but then you would write 1 your first choice, 2 your second choice, and 3
Mhm.
your third choice.
Yes,
Could
sir.
I jump in?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead, Bob.
Not because I want to steal the thunder of one of our great candidates, but it really isn't fair to put the burden on you of one of 6 competitors. This goes back a long way, and I got involved in ranked choice voting when I was an undergraduate in the 1970s, and it worked then. So I really encouraged us to bring it forward to our school board caucuses. We got a law through the state legislature enabling Arlington to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing you should realize is that your vote will stay with your first choice until he's either elected or eliminated. So you do not lose anything by indicating a second or third choice, because your vote won't move to your second and third candidate until the first guy is either in the victory circle or knocked out. And if you think of it that way,
Mm-hmm.
it really eliminates a lot of your qualms. So the point is that if your vote is uh, going toward the first choice candidate, and the first choice candidate is the choice of everybody in Arlington, unanimously, there's still voting power left that will be transferred to your second choice, or if necessary, your third choice. So what will happen is there'll be all of these wonderful candidates, and one of them will probably be eliminated, and the people that voted for that eliminated candidate, their votes will go and be distributed to the next lower choice on their ballots. So it's a very highly calculated thing. It's almost as though they were staying in the room and having a chance to have multiple rounds of balloting. That's why we call it instant runoff voting,
Bob,
because
the
instead
question I've been asked is if you vote for only two, does that invalidate your ballot? And I
No, it
said
does
I
not.
don't think
I
that's the
believe it
case.
does not. It
It
should
does
not.
not.
But
It does not. And even if you vote for one, it does not invalidate your ballot. Um,
and I
yeah.
can offer you scientific proof that if you vote for JD and X, and your wife votes for X and JD, and the likelihood is that both of them will be uh, elected regardless of whether you had conspired with other people to use a certain order of choice.
Yeah.
Okay,
There's also
thanks.
there's also something, Mr. Joe. I will highly I can encourage if you have time on Monday. I think the NAACP is and I think the Arlington the Committee of 100 perhaps tomorrow is going to have some 15 minutes at least for the Committee of 100 at
What
their event. They're going to
the
talk
League
about
of Women Voters has one too, but
yes, sir, yes, sir. So real quick, Bob, if I may, for 30 seconds, I've always been concerned about educating and informing our electorate with ranked choice voting. Um, I support it, but I think we perhaps hesitated a little bit because we're finding, as you can see right now with Joe, and many others that I'm coming around and knocking doors, they don't know what's going on here with ranked choice voting. Um, it's a great thing. I explain it to them, but there's some nuances because it is new. Um, so look, lessons will be learned from this. In lieu of marking 6 candidates, Joe, you're only going to be able to mark 3. In a perfect world in ranked choice voting, you should be able to mark all 6, right? Our system that we have in place is not prepared yet for that. So there again lies some problems. And plus, I feel the county did not put forth enough resources as it relates to in this well in advance. $50,000 is not enough to educate an electorate of 160,000 people. I would have done things a bit differently, not put the burden on nonprofits and other organizations to educate the electorate. So that's JD's take. We'll learn from this and won't repeat it again. Okay, as we move forward.
Yeah, I think it would have been nice to have some type of video, at least online, or
Mhm.
maybe at the courthouse, because most people go to the courthouse initially. That kind of plays out the process and
Mhm.
how it works. Because there's nothing there. You just go in and they give you the ballot, and you're like, okay, this doesn't seem hard. Let me try this out.
Last
And
year, last year in Oakland, California, I think they were pulling ranked choice voting, and what they found was, and this was a big article NAACP did, um, a lot of the elders, all right, our seasoned folks out there felt somewhat disenfranchised because they showed up and they were not educated. They did not know how ranked choice voted worked. That's another story. I think we're going to be okay in Arlington because one, we are a very highly educated electorate. Uh, but there may have been some ways as we reflect to kind of enhance how we educate and inform the public. And I would share with everyone here how I do business and how I deal with the public is educate and inform up front is the best thing. In the Marine Corps, we used to learn you prepare for war in the time of peace. So even in missing middle housing, right? Had we perhaps done more? I don't, people are saying that now, despite 20 some odd organizations that knew. I think we probably could have. We look now at different pockets, different areas we could have strategically engaged with our community. And I know there's a lot of conversation about county governance and how we communicate to the electorate. We can always improve and should endeavor to improve ourselves and how we do the business for our people. Joe, you still have your hand up? Okay. I know we're
I have
right
a
at
quick
time.
question.
Excuse me.
I have
Go
one quick.
ahead, Rose.
So JD, when you're knocking on the door, what's the top 3 issues that you keep hearing?
Um, right now, community engagement's one. Or are you going to look out for us? Transportation's another one, and then housing.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I think a lot of it is dependent on neighborhood, and you know the dynamics as well as I do. All of you on this call especially you, Bob and Kathleen. If I'm in a certain part of Arlington knocking doors, the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, a lot of times is, the housing thing was a debacle, right? Or if I'm on another, if I pivot and go somewhere else, right? Another part of it, like this weekend, I was in a whole other neighborhood, and they were concerned about street safety and transportation, right? I'm using like Douglas Park and parts of Green Valley, right? So it's a mixture, but I would say what I'm hearing are those things there. And then it varies. As a candidate, y'all know I got to try to hit the doors and move on to the next one. Sometimes I find myself 20 minutes with a person, but I like it. It's okay. But I gotta try to discipline myself and keep moving. That's why I take people with me now to kind of pull me along, because if not, I'll end up. But that's what I hope I answered your question, Rose.
Yeah, yeah. I have a feeling we're going to have a good turnout.
Yeah, I know
Yeah,
we're. Yeah, go ahead. I'm sorry, Bob.
but to emphasize, it's going to be on June 20th. It's a county-sponsored primary, so there's all of the precinct polling places being used, unlike our school board thing this week. And you vote in your normal polling place, and early voting has started.
Mm-hmm.
Tell everybody
Yeah.
that.
Well, we have
And
been doing that. We have a very robust uh, media presence, and we have engaged. I think whoever may be following me, to your point, Bob, about early voting has started. These are the locations, these are the times, and I think that information, if all candidates were to kind of do that, we can cover a lot of space. I've put an extended amount of resources into digital marketing as well, so people are knowing about the vote. I am a bit concerned as it relates to the school board, even though I don't have anything to do that. I heard we had about 300 people show up this past weekend. I hope we have more show up on this Sunday, because 300 is not a large turnout for a full day this past Sunday. So I hope we get more numbers there in that school board caucus, because we want our people to be engaged, right? This is serious business, and when I talk about leadership, and when I talk about uh, working on behalf of people, this is, you can't be a siloed leader. For me, I feel comfortable working in any area of governance, and we haven't talked about environment, we haven't talked about the business side. There's just so many areas that need to be addressed, and what I'm hearing a lot of single issue themed conversation, and I don't hope we don't set ourselves up, like I used to say, for the okey doke, because if you don't understand the multifaceted approach you have to take to governance and what's going on in Arlington, one of the best cities in America, you're setting our community up for failure. Now I want to serve in your seat. It's not my seat, in your seat, with distinction and with honor. And I think, from what I'm being told, if I am elected, I may be the first veteran, Bob. I'm not sure. No one's been able to pull the records on that, but we haven't had a veteran at least serve, to my knowledge. Maybe no one's been able to pull the record on it, but that'll be great for our 15,000 veterans here in Arlington. Um, I'll look forward to serving. I know we're probably past time a little bit, and
no,
I'll
but could you tell us your website and just a few other ideas of yours?
Sure. So my website is www.jdforarlington.com. You can reach me on Twitter at JD for Arlington. You can reach me on Instagram, jdforarlington.com. You can reach me on Facebook. You can reach me just about anywhere. You can reach me at Ruthie's. That's a joke there, Bob, because I was there this morning. Many people know that I'm there quite a bit. Again, I am proud to at this point, as I mentioned earlier, a broad level of support from current and past elected leaders. One of which was just with Senator Barbara Favola, who we all hold in high regard. The Honorable Ingrid Maroy, Parisa Dehghani-Tafti, Emma Viola Sanchez, Monique O'Grady, Nancy Van Dorn, Jennifer Carroll Forge, Joyce Cole, many folks in the community, and then the average day citizen, my neighbor who's not so much involved into politics, because that's what really counts. So I'm happy where we are. This is a multi-generational, multicultural organization that is very inclusive. It's not divisive. I said on day one, um, I want to do more. Together we stand, divided we fall. And I'm not looking to be divisive in no way, shape, or form. Thus is why this campaign remains upright and will stay that way, because anything less would be uncivilized. And our community is at a point right now where there's so much toxicity, right? Uh, happening at the national level, and then sometimes you'll see the remnants of it at the lowest level. And we have to do our best to uplift everyone. We can have different ideologies and perspectives, but I tell folks, if you're talking about Democrats, and you're talking about our values as Democrats, and you're talking about Democratic platform, uh, I know it. I experienced. I've lived it. Um, if you haven't heard, my first cousin, the person I grew up with as a little lad down in South Carolina, we were on text message this morning. Her name is Crystal Spain. She was just elected last week. The chair made history of the South Carolina Democratic Party. Um, First African American. Uh, and watch out, I may have her up here in a few weeks. So anyway, that is a good thing. That's what I have, Bob, and team. I look forward to moving forward. Thank you, Rose. Good to see you. I look forward to serving you. I would love to be everyone's number one choice, but if I'm not your number one choice for some reason, I would love to be your second choice. And if I can't make it to number two, I'll take number three. But at the end of the day, everybody who's running, they're running for a reason. And whoever is elected, if I'm elected and someone else, I want you to know that I can work with anyone. I can work alongside anyone. Um, Again, we all have different lived experiences, but we need true, steadfast leadership in government. And also, representation matters, and diversity matters, and experience matters, and leadership matters. So, with that being said, I thank you for having me today. It's good to see Kathleen and Herschel, Paula, Todd Truitt, Joe, and Bob, of course, as always. Thank you for hosting such a wonderful time for us to get together and coalesce. I look forward to seeing y'all in and around Arlington. Uh, if you have nothing else for me, that's all I have
Sure.
for this.
We want to thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. I will say in my defense that to the extent the lunch crowd sort of died down a bit over time, we are recording and posting this video online for those
Mhm.
Arlington seniors who didn't have a chance to stay for the entire meal. So, Todd, do you have any last minute comments? Because you just came on. Do you have anything? You all
No, I
set?
got JD's campaign email that he was appearing today. I was like, oh, damn it. So I was like, tried to get on really quick just to watch it.
Okay. Okay, the other thing, that the announcement I made at the start of this session, which I'll repeat very briefly, is yes, we do have the school board caucus Wednesday and Saturday. I was there on Sunday, the first day, and be sure to vote, bring all your friends to vote. And we are returning to live in-person lunching, starting with the June lunch, which will be held at Ramparts Restaurant, and the sign-up form is already posted online in the link in our email. So I hope you sign up and pre-order your entrees. Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you, JD, and we'll adjourn until next month.